The gunshots pierced the silence of the Montana Territory wilderness, sending birds scattering into the late afternoon sky as Zara Pritchard urged her horse faster, the thundering hooves matching the frantic beating of her heart. At 23, she had never imagined fleeing for her life through unfamiliar terrain, but the year 1878 had brought unexpected dangers to her previously sheltered existence. "Come on, Maple," she pleaded with her chestnut mare, risking a glance over her shoulder. 3 riders crested the hill behind her, their silhouettes menacing against the setting sun. The hem of her once fine blue dress was torn and muddied, her hair falling loose from its careful arrangement. 4 days earlier, she had been traveling west with her uncle's wagon train when disaster struck. Another shot rang out, closer this time, and Zara felt a sting as the bullet grazed her arm. She bit back a cry of pain, determined not to give her pursuers the satisfaction. These were not common bandits, but members of the Jensen gang, notorious throughout the territory. They had attacked the wagon train, killing most of the travelers, including her uncle, and taking their valuables before setting fire to the wagons. Zara had only escaped by hiding beneath a false bottom in her uncle's wagon, clutching the deed to the land he had promised would be her fresh start. When night fell after the massacre, she had managed to retrieve Maple and flee, but the gang had discovered her absence by morning and had been hunting her ever since. Now, exhausted and wounded, she knew Maple couldn't maintain this pace much longer. Ahead, the landscape dipped into a small valley, and Zara spotted the remnants of what appeared to be an abandoned homestead, a dilapidated cabin, a corral with broken fencing, and the skeleton of a wagon with a shattered axle, its canvas cover in tatters. Hope flared in her chest. Perhaps she could hide there, at least long enough to catch her breath and tend to her wound. Guiding Maple down into the valley, Zara dismounted quickly behind the cabin, out of sight from the ridge. She slapped Maple's flank, sending the loyal horse trotting away to the small creek nearby. If the Jensen gang found the horse, they might assume Zara had continued on horseback. Clutching her bleeding arm, Zara crouched and made her way to the broken wagon. Its weathered wood offered scant protection, but the fallen side created a small cavity where she might remain unseen. Ducking behind it, she pulled her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible. The deed to her uncle's land was tucked securely in the inner pocket she'd sewn into her bodice, the last piece of her dream for a new life. The sound of approaching horses made her breath catch. She closed her eyes, pressing her hand over her mouth to quiet her ragged breathing. The riders were closer now, their voices carrying in the still air. "She can't have gotten far," a gruff voice called out. "That mare of hers was nearly spent. Check that cabin." Tears threatened to spill from Zara's eyes as she heard boots hit the ground and the creak of the cabin door being forced open. She prayed they wouldn't think to search behind the broken wagon. The minutes stretched painfully as she listened to the men ransacking the cabin and exploring the property. "Nothing in there," one of them reported. "Maybe she kept riding." "I saw tracks heading toward the creek," another replied. "Let's check it out." Zara held her breath as the sound of hoofbeats faded in the direction of the creek where she'd sent Maple. Her relief was short-lived, however, when she heard the unmistakable sound of someone walking slowly around the homestead, boots crunching on the dry grass. "I know you're here, Missy," came a voice closer than the others. "You've led us on quite a chase, but it ends now. That land deed belongs to Mr. Jensen, and he aims to have it." She pressed herself further into her hiding place, heart hammering so loudly she feared it would give her away. The footsteps circled the wagon, and Zara knew discovery was imminent. She closed her eyes, clutching the small knife she had managed to take when she fled. It was hardly a defense against armed men, but she wouldn't surrender without a fight. The footsteps stopped. She could sense someone standing just on the other side of the wagon. A gunshot suddenly cracked through the air, followed by a strangled cry and the thud of a body hitting the ground. Zara bit back a scream, unsure what had happened or who had fired. More shots echoed from the direction of the creek, followed by shouts and the sound of galloping horses. Someone was engaging the Jensen gang. But who? And were they any safer than the men pursuing her? Minutes passed in tense silence. Zara remained frozen in her hiding place, afraid to move or make a sound. Then footsteps approached again, different from before, measured and careful. "Hello?" a deep voice called out. "If anyone's hiding, you can come out now. Those men won't be troubling you anymore." Zara didn't move. It could be a trick. The footsteps came closer to the wagon, and a shadow fell across her hiding place. Zara gripped her knife tighter, prepared to lash out if necessary. A man's face appeared, framed by a worn leather hat. His eyes, a startling blue against sun-bronzed skin, widened slightly at the sight of her. He was perhaps in his late 20s, with several days' worth of stubble on his jaw and a concerned expression that somehow didn't strike her as threatening. "You're bleeding," he observed softly, gaze moving to her wounded arm. Then, with a gentleness that belied his rugged appearance, he extended a hand and whispered, "You're safe now." Zara hesitated, searching his face for any sign of deception. Finding none, she slowly lowered her knife. "Are they—" She couldn't finish the question. "Two dead, one fled," he replied matter-of-factly. "The Jensen gang doesn't usually venture this far north. You must have something they want badly." Zara's hand instinctively moved to her bodice where the deed was hidden. The man noticed but made no comment. "Name's Rhett Zimmer," he said, still offering his hand. "I've got a place about 2 miles from here. You can clean up and rest there if you'd like." Zara took his hand, wincing as the movement pulled at her injured arm. "Zara Pritchard. Thank you for your help, Mr. Zimmer." Rhett helped her to her feet, his touch respectful and cautious. "Can you walk? My horse is tied near the cabin." She nodded, though her legs felt unsteady after days of hard riding and fear. "My mare. I saw her by the creek. We'll collect her on our way," Rhett assured her. He shrugged out of his duster and draped it around her shoulders. Only then did Zara realize she was trembling. As they walked toward the cabin, Zara caught sight of the body of one of her pursuers. She quickly averted her eyes. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Rhett said quietly. "But those men, they weren't going to stop." "I know," Zara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They killed my uncle and everyone in our wagon train. I was the only survivor." Rhett's expression darkened. "The attack 3 days ago, near Yellowstone Pass." Zara nodded, surprised. "You heard about it?" "Word travels, even out here." He helped her mount his horse, a magnificent black stallion. "The territorial marshal's been tracking Jensen for months. His gang has been raiding settlements and wagon trains from Wyoming to Montana." Rhett retrieved Maple from the creek, and they set off toward his homestead as dusk settled over the mountains. Zara found herself studying her rescuer's broad shoulders as he led the horses, wondering what kind of man made his home in such wild country. The answer became clearer as they approached a sturdy log cabin nestled in a small clearing. Unlike the abandoned homestead, Rhett's place spoke of care and industry. A well-constructed corral housed several horses, a small garden plot was neatly fenced to keep out wildlife, and smoke curled invitingly from the stone chimney. "It's not much," Rhett said as he helped her dismount, "but it's solid and warm." "It's wonderful," Zara replied honestly. After days of fearing she would die alone in the wilderness, the sight of this well-kept homestead seemed like paradise. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a cooking area beside it. A wooden table with 2 chairs occupied the center, while a curtain partially separated what appeared to be a sleeping area. Shelves lined with books surprised Zara. She hadn't expected a frontier cabin to contain such a library. "Sit," Rhett instructed, gesturing to one of the chairs. "I'll tend to your arm." Zara obeyed, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. Rhett gathered clean cloths and a bottle of whiskey, then filled a basin with water from a bucket near the hearth. He worked in silence, carefully cutting away the blood-stained sleeve of her dress to reveal the wound beneath. "You're fortunate," he observed. "The bullet only grazed you. It'll be sore, but it should heal clean if we keep it from festering." His hands were gentle as he cleaned the wound, though Zara couldn't suppress a hiss of pain when he applied the whiskey. "Sorry," he murmured, "necessary evil." "I understand," she replied, studying his face as he worked. There was a quiet competence about him that she found reassuring. "Mr. Zimmer." "Rhett," he corrected, not looking up from his task. "Rhett," she amended. "You seem experienced with wounds." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. 4 years with the 7th Cavalry will teach a man a few things about patching up injuries. You were a soldier. Until 76. His hands paused briefly in their work. After Little Bighorn. "I'd had enough of fighting." Zara absorbed this information. The Battle of Little Bighorn had made headlines across the country 2 years earlier. General Custer and his men had been massacred by Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, one of the Army's worst defeats. To have survived such an event. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Rhett shrugged, finishing the bandage around her arm. "We all carry our ghosts, Miss Pritchard." "Zara," she insisted, "after what you've done for me, I think we can dispense with formalities." He nodded, the ghost of a smile returning as he moved to the fireplace. "Are you hungry, Zara? I've got stew from this morning. Won't take but a minute to heat." At the mention of food, her stomach growled audibly. Rhett chuckled, the sound warming the room more effectively than the crackling fire. "I'll take that as a yes." While he prepared the meal, Zara fought to keep her eyes open. The events of the past few days, coupled with the relief of finally feeling safe, conspired to pull her toward sleep. She must have dozed because the next thing she knew, Rhett was gently shaking her shoulder. "Eat first, then rest," he said, placing a bowl of fragrant stew before her. "You need your strength." The food was simple but delicious: venison, potatoes, and wild onions in a rich broth. Zara hadn't realized how famished she was until she took the first bite. They ate in comfortable silence, Rhett occasionally rising to stoke the fire or refill her cup with water. "Tomorrow I'll ride to Fort Kearny," Rhett said as they finished eating. "The marshal should be informed about what happened. He'll want to speak with you about the attack on your wagon train." Zara nodded, though the thought of reliving those terrifying moments made her stomach clench. What about the man who escaped? Won't he bring others? "Possibly," Rhett acknowledged, "but not tonight. And I doubt Jensen would risk coming this close to the fort. Still, we'll be cautious." He stood and moved to the curtained area, returning with a clean shirt and pair of trousers. "These will be far too big, but they're clean. You can change behind the curtain. The bed is yours tonight." "Where will you sleep?" Zara asked, accepting the clothes. "I've got a bedroll," he replied, nodding toward the fireplace. "I've slept in worse places." Zara wanted to protest. It was his home, after all, but the thought of a real bed after nights on the hard ground was too tempting. She nodded gratefully and moved behind the curtain. The oversized clothes swallowed her, but they smelled of soap and fresh air, a welcome change from her filthy, torn dress. When she emerged, Rhett had laid out a bedroll near the hearth and was checking the loads in his revolver. "Thank you," Zara said, feeling suddenly shy. "For everything?" Rhett looked up, and for a moment something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "Get some rest," he said softly. "You're safe here." As Zara settled onto the surprisingly comfortable bed, she realized it was the first time since the attack that she truly believed those words. Within minutes, she was asleep. Zara awoke to sunlight streaming through the cabin's small window and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then, the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, wincing at the pain in her arm. Rhett was at the fireplace, frying something in a cast-iron pan. He turned at her movement. "Morning," he greeted. "How's the arm?" Zara flexed it carefully. Sore, but better. Thank you. He nodded, returning his attention to the pan. Breakfast is nearly ready. I need to check on the horses first. After he stepped outside, Zara rose and tidied herself as best she could. She found a basin of fresh water and gratefully washed her face and hands. Her reflection in the small mirror hanging near the door showed a woman she barely recognized. Pale, with shadows under her eyes and her blonde hair in tangles. When Rhett returned, they shared a breakfast of venison, eggs, and biscuits. The food revitalized Zara, and she felt strength returning to her limbs. I'll be gone most of the day, Rhett explained as they ate. Fort Kearney is about 3 hours' ride from here. I've left a rifle by the door. Do you know how to use it? Yes, Zara replied. My father taught me before he died. My uncle always said it was unseemly for a woman to handle firearms, but Pa insisted. Your pa was a wise man, Rhett said, a note of approval in his voice. If anyone approaches, don't hesitate. Better to shoot and apologize later than... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. After breakfast, Rhett showed her where everything was in the cabin food stores, extra ammunition, medical supplies. Then he saddled his horse and prepared to leave. I should be back by nightfall, he said, adjusting his hat against the morning sun. Bar the door after I've gone, and don't open it for anyone but me. Zara nodded, suddenly apprehensive about being left alone. Rhett seemed to sense her unease. You've survived worse than a day alone in a secure cabin, he reminded her gently. You're stronger than you know, Zara Pritchard. With those words, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Zara standing in the doorway. She watched until he disappeared into the trees, then closed and barred the door as instructed. The day passed slowly. Zara explored the cabin more thoroughly, finding evidence of Rhett's solitary but orderly life. His books revealed eclectic tastes, historical accounts, poetry, scientific journals, even a few novels. She smiled at a well-worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans, its pages marked with pressed wildflowers serving as bookmarks. In a trunk at the foot of the bed, she discovered a tintype photograph of a younger Rhett in cavalry uniform, standing beside another soldier. They were smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, unaware of the tragedy that awaited at Little Bighorn. Zara carefully returned the photograph to its place, feeling as though she had intruded on something private. By midday, restlessness drove her outside, though she kept the rifle close and stayed near the cabin. The air was crisp with early autumn, the surrounding forest a tapestry of green, gold, and russet. In the corral, Maple whickered a greeting, seeming content with her new companions. Zara checked her arm, pleased to find the wound looking clean with no signs of infection. She redressed it with fresh bandages from Rhett's supplies, marveling at how well-stocked his medical kit was. Most frontier dwellers had little more than whiskey and strips of cloth for treating injuries. As evening approached, Zara grew increasingly anxious. Rhett had said he would return by nightfall, but the sun was low on the horizon with no sign of him. She prepared a simple supper from the provisions he had left, trying not to imagine scenarios where he had encountered the remaining Jensen gang members. The first stars were appearing when Zara finally heard hoofbeats approaching. She positioned herself near the window, rifle ready, until she recognized Rhett's broad-shouldered silhouette in the twilight. Relief flooded her as she unbarred the door. Rhett looked tired but satisfied as he entered the cabin. Marshal Atwood was already at the fort, he reported, removing his hat and coat. He's gathering a posse to track down Jensen and the rest of his gang. He'll want to speak with you, but not until his men have secured the area. Did you tell him about the land deed? Zara asked, setting a plate of food before him. Rhett nodded, sitting heavily at the table. He believes that's what Jensen is after. Apparently your uncle's claim includes a significant silver deposit. Jensen likely learned about it and decided to take it for himself. Zara sank into the chair opposite him. I had no idea. Uncle Harris only told me it was good farmland. The silver was recently discovered, Rhett explained, eating with the efficiency of a man accustomed to taking meals when available rather than at set times. Your uncle might not have known when he filed the claim. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Rhett spoke again. The marshal is sending a telegraph to your nearest kin. Do you have family elsewhere? Zara shook her head. Uncle Harris was my last relative. My parents died of typhoid when I was 16. I've been living with my uncle ever since. Rhett studied her across the table, his expression thoughtful. What will you do with the land now? It was a question Zara had been asking herself since escaping the massacre. I'm not sure, she admitted. Uncle Harris wanted to start a horse ranch. He said Montana had the best grazing land for raising quality stock. She traced a pattern on the wooden tabletop. I know nothing about ranching, but I don't want to sell his dream. It's dangerous country for a woman alone, Rhett observed, his tone neutral. I'm learning that, Zara replied with a wan smile. But where else would I go? Back east to be someone's governess or companion. At least here, I have a chance to build something of my own. Rhett didn't respond immediately, but something in his gaze had softened. He rose and moved to the fireplace, adding another log to the flames. The marshal says it will be at least a week before it's safe for you to travel to your uncle's claim. You're welcome to stay here until then. Thank you, Zara said, touched by his continued hospitality. I don't want to impose. You're not, he assured her, turning back to face her. It's been a long time since I've had company. It's nice. The way he said the word suggested that nice barely scratched the surface of what he meant. Zara felt a curious warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the crackling fire. The next morning, Zara woke early and decided to make herself useful. By the time Rhett emerged from behind the curtain where he had again insisted she take the bed, she had coffee brewing and biscuit dough ready for the oven. You didn't have to do that, he said, looking pleasantly surprised. I wanted to, she replied. You've done so much for me. After breakfast, Rhett suggested they check the garden plot. Frost will be coming soon, he explained. Need to harvest what's left before it hits. Working side by side in the garden, Zara found herself relaxing in Rhett's company. He was a man of few words, but his silence never felt awkward. When he did speak, his observations were thoughtful and often laced with a dry humor she found appealing. Were you always on your own out here? She asked as they filled a basket with late-season vegetables. Rhett's hands stilled briefly. No. After the army, I came out here with a friend, William Baker. We served together. He gestured vaguely toward the cabin. We built this place together, planned to raise horses. What happened? Zara asked gently, sensing the story didn't have a happy ending. Pneumonia took him winter before last, Rhett replied, his voice matter-of-fact, though pain flickered in his eyes. Bad season. Couldn't get a doctor in time. I'm sorry, Zara said, thinking of the photograph she had found the two young soldiers, smiling and full of plans for the future. Rhett shrugged, but his shoulders remained tense. Life out here is hard. You learn to accept that, or you don't survive. They worked in silence for a while before Zara spoke again. My parents died within a week of each other. I thought I would die too. Not from typhoid, but from grief. It felt impossible to keep breathing when they couldn't. Rhett looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing past the surface to the scars beneath. Yet here you are, he said softly. Still breathing. Still breathing, she agreed. That evening, as they shared another meal, the conversation flowed more easily. Rhett told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his time in the Army, and his decision to seek solitude in the Montana Territory after losing William. Zara shared stories of her life in St. Louis, her uncle's dreams of Western prosperity, and her own secret ambition to someday write stories about frontier life. You could do it, Rhett said when she confessed this ambition. You've got the voice for it and now the experience, though I wish it hadn't come at such cost. His belief in her, stated so simply and directly, touched Zara deeply. No one had ever taken her writing aspirations seriously before. Days passed in a similar rhythm. Each morning, Rhett would check the surrounding area for any sign of trouble. Then they would work together on various tasks around the homestead. Zara's wound healed quickly, and she found herself growing stronger daily. In the evenings, they would share meals and conversation, gradually revealing more of themselves to each other. On the fourth day, while Rhett repaired a section of the corral fence, Zara found herself watching him work, admiring the confident efficiency of his movements. When he caught her looking, she didn't look away. Something was growing between them, something neither had expected, but neither seemed willing to deny. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Rhett suddenly said, "I rode out to your uncle's claim yesterday while you were resting." Zara looked up in surprise. "You did?" He nodded. "Wanted to see what Jensen is so desperate to get his hands on. It's good land, fertile valley with a creek running through it. The silver deposit is in the hills to the west of the main property." "What's the cabin like?" Zara asked, curious about the home her uncle had described in his letters. "Solid construction," Rhett replied. "Needs some work, but the foundation is sound. Good spot for horses, too, sheltered from the worst of the winter storms." Zara tried to picture it, the land that was now hers, the place where she was supposed to begin her new life. "Thank you for checking on it," she said. "It helps to know it's real. Sometimes everything before the attack feels like a dream." Rhett was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. "You know," he said finally, "one person alone would struggle with a place that size. Even with hired help, it would be difficult." "I know," Zara sighed. "I've been thinking about that. Perhaps I could sell part of it." "Or you could have a partner," Rhett interrupted, his voice carefully neutral. Zara's breath caught. "A partner?" Rhett met her gaze, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her heart race. "I know it's sudden. We've known each other less than a week. But out here, life doesn't always give you the luxury of time." He leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. "I've been alone since William died. Thought that's how I wanted it. But having you here..." He paused, searching for words. "It's reminded me there's more to living than just surviving." Zara felt tears pricking at her eyes, touched by his honesty. "Rhett, you don't need to answer now," he said quickly. "It's a lot to consider. And if you decide you'd rather make your own way, I'll respect that. But if you wanted someone to help build that horse ranch your uncle dreamed of, well, I know horses, and I know what it means to hold on to a dream for someone you've lost." Zara reached across the space between them and took his hand. His skin was rough with calluses, warm against hers. "I don't need time to consider," she said softly. "These past days with you, they've shown me what kind of man you are. Kind, honorable, strong when you need to be, gentle when it matters." She smiled through the tears that now spilled freely. "I would be honored to have you as a partner, Rhett Zimmer, in ranching and in life, if that's what you're proposing." The tension in Rhett's shoulders eased, and a smile transformed his face, making him look younger and unburdened. "That's exactly what I'm proposing, Zara Pritchard." He turned his hand to clasp hers properly. "I know it's not the courtship you deserve." "It's better," Zara interrupted. "It's real. We've seen each other at our truest, you saving me at my most vulnerable, me witnessing your solitary life. There's no pretense between us." Rhett stood, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. His embrace was tentative at first, as if he feared she might vanish. Zara leaned into him, resting her head against his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. "I never expected to find you," Rhett murmured against her hair. "When I heard those shots and tracked the Jensen gang to that old homestead, I was just doing what needed to be done. I never imagined I'd find someone who would change everything." Zara looked up at him, struck by the emotion in his usually composed features. "I was so frightened, hiding behind that broken wagon. when you appeared and whispered that I was safe. In that moment, I believed it completely, despite everything that had happened." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I still do." Rhett lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Zara rose on her tiptoes to meet him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, a question and answer all at once. When they parted, the look they shared held a promise of all that might be. 3 days later, Marshal Atwood arrived with news that the remainder of the Jensen gang had been captured, attempting to cross into Wyoming territory. The immediate danger had passed, though Jensen himself had yet to be found. "We believe he's headed for California," the marshal explained as they sat around Rhett's table. "My men will keep searching, but you should be safe to claim your property, Miss Pritchard." "Mrs. Zimmer soon enough," Rhett corrected with a smile, his hand finding Zara's beneath the table. The marshal's eyebrows rose. "Well now, that was quick work, Zimmer." Zara laughed, no longer embarrassed by the unconventional nature of their courtship. "When you know, you know." "Marshal Atwood," the older man chuckled. "Can't argue with that. My Eliza and I were engaged after 2 weeks' acquaintance. Been married 37 years now." He tipped his hat to them. "I wish you both the same happiness." A week later, Zara stood on the porch of what would soon be their new home, the cabin on her uncle's claim. Rhett had ridden ahead the previous day to check that all was secure, and now she surveyed the land that would be their future. The valley spread before her, golden in the autumn sunlight, the creek glinting silver as it wound through the property. In the distance, the mountains rose majestic against the sky. Arms encircled her from behind, and she leaned back against Rhett's solid chest. "What do you think?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "It's perfect," she replied, covering his hands with hers. "It needs work, but we can make it wonderful." "We already have the most important things," Rhett said, turning her in his arms. "Everything else is just details." Zara smiled up at him, marveling at how dramatically her life had changed in less than 2 weeks. From terror and loss to hope and love, a journey she could never have imagined when she hid behind that broken wagon, certain her life was about to end. "I love you, Rhett Zimmer," she said, speaking the words aloud for the first time. His eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "And I love you, Zara Pritchard, soon to be Zimmer." As he bent to kiss her, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just safety, but a home, not just in this place, but in this man's heart. The land deed hidden in her trunk was valuable, yes, but the true treasure was the life they would build together, day by day, season by season, in this wild and beautiful country they would both call home. 2 weeks later, they were married in Fort Kearny, with Marshal Atwood and his wife as witnesses. By spring, the first foals of their horse ranch were born, strong and healthy like the love that had blossomed so unexpectedly from danger and courage. And every night, when Rhett whispered, "You're safe now," before they drifted to sleep, Zara knew it wasn't just a promise, but a truth they had created together, a sanctuary built not of logs and nails, but of trust and devotion, strong enough to weather whatever the frontier might bring.